In the years that followed Sita's passing, things quietly changed in the village. Not with declarations or ceremonies, but in smaller, softer ways. A well was dug near her home, and no one could agree whose idea it was. A bench was placed under the neem tree where she used to sit, with no plaque and no name, just space for anyone to rest. Children played near her garden again, and a sign was nailed to the old fence. It read, "Please do not pick the roses." People began to do things differently. A widow named Farah, who used to keep to herself, started bringing extra rice to the schoolhouse each week. An old farmer named Ralph, once gruff and impatient, took in a stray boy from the next town over. And even Sarah, the one who once gossiped the loudest, stopped to listen before she spoke. She said it was because she kept dreaming of Sita. And in every dream, she wasn't angry, she was just quiet, smiling, forgiving. That single quotes as how real change happens. Not when we're told, but when we feel, when a story sinks deep into us and stays, not to haunt, but to soften, to stretch the corners of our heart that had grown too sharp, to remind us we can be better still. Even now, Amara returned once a year. She didn't speak much. She'd stay a few days, tidy the home, refresh the rose garden, sit under the neem tree, and then leave. But one year, she brought a child with her, a quiet girl with long black hair and curious eyes. They said she was adopted. They said her name was Eman, Hope, and that year, something new happened. The child ran ahead of her mother into the village square, barefoot, bold, as if she belonged there. She didn't ask for permission. She didn't need to. She knelt in the middle of the square and began to draw in the dust with a stick, a shape, then a sun, then a tree, then a woman standing alone, then dozens of little houses around her, and all of them with their doors open. The people gathered, watching in silence. Some smiled, some cried, and Amara said quietly, "She saved us all." You just didn't know it then. The villagers nodded. They knew it now. Maybe you're watching this today with your own story, weighing silently on your soul. Maybe you've been called selfish for choosing a path that didn't fit into others' expectations. Maybe you've had to carry burdens alone so others could rest lighter. Maybe your sacrifices went unseen, and your kindness meadow. If so, you're not alone. Sita's story is yours, too. There's a kind of courage in quiet service that often goes unrewarded, but not unre-em-me-em. It ripples, it roots, it rises. You see, true legacy is not just what we leave behind. In others, the strength to forgive, the power to endure, the gentleness to love without condition. In old age, the world grows quieter, the applause fades, the visitors stop coming, but that is when the truth speaks. Loudest in memories, in reflections, in the stillness of a heart reviewing a life fully lived. And often, what remains are not the victories, but the moments we chose love over pride, patience over anger, others over self. If you're watching this and you feel invisible, if you wonder whether anything you've done still matters, please hear this. It does. You do more than you will ever fully know. And if you've ever thought, I gave everything and no one noticed, know this too. Someone noticed. A child, a neighbor, a stranger in pain who found shelter in your presence. Even if they never said it, your kindness planted something, and like Sita's roses, it continues to bloom. This story isn't just for those who serve. It's also for those learning how to see. To look beyond reputation, to listen before judging. To wonder what battles someone is silently fighting, because everyone has a story. Some are loud, some are hidden, but all of them matter. So dear friend, if you've stayed until now alone, it was about you, about us, about the invisible threads of care and sacrifice that connect generations, often quietly, often painfully, often beautifully. If something in this story touched your heart, if it reminded you of someone you once knew, a mother, a teacher, a neighbor, a stranger, someone misunderstood but profoundly kind, we'd love to hear about them. Truly, please share their name, their memory, or even just a thought in the comments. Your words might be the comfort someone else needs tonight. And if you found peace in this story, if it helped you feel a little more seen, a little less alone, consider subscribing. Not for numbers, but because this space is meant to be a village, a quiet place for soft stories, old wisdom, and the kind of connection that lingers. We release these stories for people like you, people with deep hearts and thoughtful lives, people who know that sometimes the greatest strength comes not from shouting, but from staying. So, until next time, be kind to yourself, honor the life you've lived, forgive what you must, remember what matters, and never forget, even if they called you selfish. You may have saved a village without anyone ever knowing, but now they do. The monsoons came early that year, and with them came the last piece of Sita's story. A young woman named Amara arrived at the village in a faded green shalwar kameez, carrying only a notebook and a bag of dried berries. She looked exhausted, like someone who had traveled far, not just in distance, but in grief. She walked to the edge of the village, toward Sita's old home. Then she sat on the steps and cried. No one knew who she was until she opened her notebook and began to read. I was 10 when she found me. I had been abandoned near the edge of the forest. I don't remember my parents. I don't remember how I got there. All I remember is a pair of hands worn, rough, gentle, lifting me from the dirt. She never said much, but she fed me, taught me, protected me. She called me Amara. I don't know if that was my name, but she said it meant grace, and for 10 years, she was my everything. The village listened in stunned silence. Amara was the secret, the hidden chapter, the reason Sita never married, the child she raised. In private, out of the reach of whispers and judgment. The girl no one knew about because Sita feared she'd be taken away, seen as unfit, unworthy, incapable of love. So she raised her daughter in quiet, schooled her under the trees, sang to her in the wind, and when Amara turned 20, she sent her away to study with a letter and a wish. The letter said, "You do not owe me your life. I gave you mine freely. All I ask is that you live boldly, softly, kindly. Let no one silence your joy. Let no one shame your grief. And when they ask where you came from, tell them I was raised by a woman with calloused hands and a wide, quiet heart." Amara wept reading it. The villagers wept to return. She had come to return home, only to find Sita gone. But in her place, she found 100 strangers mourning the mother they never truly knew. Amara stayed, not for long, just a season, long enough to tend to the rose garden her mother had once grown, long enough to sit beneath the neem tree and write down everything she remembered, long enough to paint one wall of the house a deep sky blue, Sita's favorite. And before she left, she whispered into the wind, "They see you now." Legacy isn't always a statue. Sometimes it's a child with soft eyes and a steady voice. Sometimes it's a village that plants trees in silence. Sometimes it's a stranger at your door with warm food, refusing to say who sent them. Sometimes it's you. We live in a world loud with achievement, where people clap for trophies, for likes, for headlines. But maybe the most important work is the kind no one sees. The healing, the listening, the quiet staying when others walk away. Sita's story is not rare, but it's rarely told, and that's why it matters. She reminds us that service doesn't have to be grand, that love doesn't always arrive with flowers or fanfare. Sometimes it looks like fixing a broken step, like teaching a child to read, like collecting rainwater for others before you drink yourself. These are the acts that build the soul of a village, the soul of a family, the soul of the world. So, if you're watching this perhaps with a tired heart, or memories heavy on your chest, know this: you don't have to shout to matter. You don't have to be known to make a difference. Sometimes the most meaningful life is the one lived without applause, but never without impact. There's an old saying, when the great tree falls, even the silent birds cry. That's what Sita was, a great, quiet tree, and her falling shook the village awake. In her final days, she wrote only one entry in her notebook. It said, "If they say I was selfish, let them. I know the truth, and the truth doesn't need to speak it lives." What is the truth of your life? What is the quiet thing you've done that no one ever saw, but you carry it proudly in your heart? Maybe you raised a child that wasn't yours. Maybe you forgave someone who never said sorry. Maybe you gave when you had little. Maybe you loved without ever being thanked. That's your Sita story. It matters more than you know. And to anyone watching this who's still searching for peace, for meaning, for their place in the world, maybe this story is your sign. Not to be louder, not to do more, but to trust that your quiet goodness is enough, because it is. Let this story settle in your heart like soft rain. Let it remind you that there are lives being lived beside you that you may never understand, but that doesn't mean they don't hold beauty. And let it encourage you to see people not for what they show, but for what they carry. You never know who's saving a village without saying a word. Rashida was the postwoman for 20 years. In all those years, she never knew that the brown envelope she delivered each month to Sita's workshop contained her pension knot, because Sita was collecting it for herself, but because she had quietly redirected it into a local education trust under a different name. Razia Foundation it was called. There was no Razia in the village until they found an old letter in Sita's drawer addressed to her mother, whose name was Razia. She had named the foundation after her, in honor, in memory, in silence. Rashida cried when she found out. She lived for us, but we never knocked on her door, not once. It's a cruel irony, isn't it, that the people who give the most often go unnoticed, not because they are unimportant, but because they never demand to be noticed. They slip through life like wind under a door quiet, persistent, carrying warmth into cold places, and when they're gone, we suddenly feel the draft. That winter, the village council met in Sita's old home-turned museum now, still smelling faintly of sawdust and jasmine oil. Farid proposed they name the central square after her, but an elder raised his hand. She wouldn't have liked that. She never wanted her name on anything. A long silence followed, and then a woman whispered, "Then maybe we should all just live the way she did." That became the motion. That became the vote. Not a statue, not a plaque, but a yearly vow from every family. One act of silent service. No name, no reward, just like SAEEDA. It began with the baker. One morning, each customer found an extra loaf in their basket, paid for by someone who remained unnamed. Then the cobbler mended children's shoes and left them at doorsteps. Then the librarian slipped handwritten notes into books, each one a gentle reminder of forgotten beauty. "I saw you pick this book. I hope it gives you peace. Your kindness is not invisible. You matter more than you know." No one claimed them. Everyone felt them. This wasn't charity, it was memory. Lived forward. Sita's legacy wasn't about martyrdom. It wasn't about teaching people to suffer in silence. It was about the sacredness of quiet giving, about choosing to serve even when the world says, "Look out for yourself," about believing that goodness doesn't need an audience, just needs to be done. That spring, a group of teenagers planted 27 trees by the riverbank. When asked why, they simply said, "She once stood here and cried. We don't know why, but now, when someone else stands here, maybe they won't feel so alone." That's how love works when it's real. It doesn't wait to be recognized. It acts. A story surfaced months later from a village elder, Baba Karim, who rarely spoke. He told of a day years ago when his only daughter fell gravely ill. The doctor said they needed medicine from the city, costly, rare. Before he could leave, a pouch of coins was placed at his door. Enough to buy the medicine, enough to save his child. He never knew who did it. Now he did. He wept. At 87, he wept like a child. I judged her, called her hard, but her hands held my family together, and I didn't even know. If you've ever been told you're too distant, too quiet, too different, if people have misunderstood your boundaries as coldness, your solitude as arrogance, your choices as selfishness, let Sita's story remind you there is wisdom in the quiet. There is love in the unseen. There is power in the unnoticed path. She didn't need applause. She didn't need fame. She needed the world to be better. She gave what she had. To make it so, some people leave behind great achievements. Others leave behind great love. She left both, but not everyone understood. Even now, years later, there are those who say she could have opened up more, made friends, been softer, and maybe they're right. Maybe she could have allowed herself more joy. Maybe she didn't need to carry it all alone. But that's the tragedy of people like her. They feel too deeply to burden others, and sometimes the weight they bear is simply their way of shielding the rest of us. So this story isn't about guilt. It's not about mourning what we didn't say. It's about remembering to see people while they're still here, to thank the quiet ones, to look again at the so-called selfish woman down the lane, the reserved uncle who never joins the gatherings, the quiet neighbor who always seems to be helping from a distance, because sometimes those are the ones holding the village together. It took losing Sita for the village to see her. But maybe you don't have to wait. Maybe you can see the Sita in your own life today. Call her, visit him, say thank you while you still can. And if you are someone who feels like Sita, if you've spent years giving quietly, serving without praise, choosing the harder path, know this: you are not alone. You are not invisible. And your life, however quiet, is a lighthouse for others. Keep shining. We need you more than we know. It's strange, isn't it? How some people disappear quietly, but their absence echoes louder than their presence ever did. After Sita passed, the village changed. Not overnight, not in grand ways, but slowly, like dawn arriving after a long, starless night. People started noticing things. The way the new trees planted outside. The school had little signs with children's names on them. Each tree gifted in memory of a child she had once tutored secretly after school hours. The way old people spoke of the days they received medicine they couldn't afford. No one ever knew who paid, but now they did. The way the mosque's foundation stood firm, even after the earthquake 2 winters ago. Because someone who understood carpentry and structure had quietly reinforced it. They noticed. Because now, without her, the silence wasn't peace anymore. It was guilt. There was one boy in particular who felt it deeply. Well, not a boy anymore. A grown man now. His name was Farid. He remembered her clearly. As a child, he used to run past her workshop, tossing pebbles at her fence, daring his friends to shout rude things. Once, he even threw a stone that cracked one of her windows. She never scolded him. But the next day, a new notebook was placed in his school bag. One his mother couldn't afford. No name, no note, just the gift. He never told anyone, and he never apologized, either now, standing in front of her grave. He wished he had. That's the thing about age. It has a way of softening the sharp edges of the past. We look back and realize the people we judge too quickly were often carrying more than we could ever imagine. Farid took it upon himself to collect her notes, her sketches, her plans. He turned her home into a small museum, not grand, not fancy, just honest. There, on a wooden board, he carved her words, the ones found scribbled in the corner of her journal. They weren't poetic, they weren't meant to be read, but they said everything. If they don't thank me, I understand. If they never know, that's okay. But let it never be said that I saw suffering. We tell stories like this not to romanticize loneliness, not to say suffering in silence is noble, but to remind ourselves that some people love differently. Some people protect by standing apart. Some people sacrifice the warmth of companionship to build shelter for others, and they are just as worthy of love. There was a woman in the village, Rani. Apahu used to avoid Sita like she was a shadow. They weren't enemies, but Rani had always seen her as standoffish, cold, unfriendly. After Sita's passing, she confessed something during a gathering of women. I used to tell my daughters, don't end up like her, alone, hard. Now I tell them, if you end up like her, we will all be better for it. Even children began to ask questions. Why didn't anyone help her? Why did she have to do it all alone? Why didn't we say thank you? Questions that often have no answers. Because the truth is, we often don't notice the angels among us until they're gone. And sometimes, the greatest regrets in life aren't the things we did, but the things we didn't. The village eventually hosted a memorial. Simple, heartfelt people came. Some cried. Some stood in silence. One woman came with a bundle of letters Sita had written to a regional water official, 24 of them, over 8 years, all of them ignored. But she kept writing, not for herself, for the village. That's what's so humbling about her story. She had every reason to give up, to become truly bitter, to walk away and say, they don't care, so why should I? But she didn't, single quotes, she chose to care, not because the world earned it, but because that's who she was. If you're watching this and wondering what your life means, if you feel overlooked, uncelebrated, or misunderstood, I want you to hear this. Your service counts. The kindness you offer quietly still matters. The ways you hold your family together, they matter, even if no one claps, even if no one sees. You are not invisible. You are building something deeper than applause. You are building legacy. There's a quiet kind of strength that doesn't come from speeches or fame. It comes from consistency, from patience, from choosing every day to do the right thing even when no one's looking. That's the kind of strength Sita had. And maybe it's the kind of strength we all have inside us, waiting to be remembered. After her passing, the village began to live differently. Neighbors started checking on one another more. The new school principal made it a rule that every student had to do one silent good deed each week with no expectation of reward. Children started drawing pictures of Sita, placing them on the old community board, writing messages like, "Thank you for saving our water. You were never selfish. You were strong. I want to be like you." They say the best teachers are those who don't give answers, but inspire the right questions. Sita didn't preach. She didn't lecture. She just lived a life so deeply rooted in service that when people finally looked closely, they saw themselves differently. One final note was found tucked under her bed, a page, worn and creased, likely forgotten over time. It wasn't addressed to anyone. It simply said, "If one day they see me as selfish, let them. If one day they see the truth, even better. But may my work outlive me. May my love remain, even if I don't." And it has. If you've ever lost someone like Sita in your life, someone who gave quietly, loved deeply, and never asked for anything in return, this video is for them. Share their name in the comments. Tell us what they meant to you. Or simply say, "I remember." And if you are that person, we see you, we thank you, and we're better because of you. They called her selfish, but she saved a village. There are people in this world who never ask to be remembered. They don't seek applause. They don't gather friends like trophies or build legacies with big speeches and even bigger donations. They live in the quiet corners. They walk alone, not because they have no one, but because they've chosen to carry burdens others wouldn't dare touch. Their love doesn't show itself in flowers or hugs or holiday feasts. It reveals itself in the unspoken, the unnoticed. The UNEBRATED. This is the story of one of those people. Her name was Sita, and for most of her life, the village simply called her selfish. There was a time when Sita was a child running through the same dusty streets as everyone else. Her mother taught at the local school, a patient woman with silver-streaked hair and gentle eyes. Her father, a carpenter, was known for fixing broken doors and broken hearts alike. They were the kind of family everyone trusted, kind, steady, always ready to help. But life is rarely fair to the kind-hearted. Sita lost her mother at 16. Illness came like a thief in the night, and took her away quietly, without fuss. Her father followed just 2 years later, a slow decline into silence no doctor could explain. And just like that, she was alone. She could have left. Most girls did. Back then, moved to the city, married into some distant family, begged an uncle to arrange something, anything, to escape the slow, suffocating life of a forgotten village. But Sita stayed. She stayed because someone had to keep her father's workshop, because children still broke chairs, and mothers still needed shelves, and prayers still needed places to kneel. She stayed because the village was grieving too. But the world doesn't often reward women who don't follow the script. She didn't marry. She didn't wear the bangles or attend the weddings or join the women who sat around the well and gossiped. She kept to herself. Her door was rarely open. Her face rarely smiled. And so the whispers began. She's bitter. She thinks she's better than us. She only cares about herself. Poor girl, turned cold. What they didn't see was how she fixed every broken window in the school without charging a rupee, or how she left food outside the mosque for anyone who needed it, never waiting to be thanked, or how every winter coats appeared mysteriously in the porches of the poorest homes. They never saw her do any of it, and that's exactly how she wanted it. Years passed. The village grew not in size, but in silence. People left for cities. Children forgot the old stories. The river that once danced through the fields began to shrink each summer. Still, Sita remained. She grew older, slower. Her hands grew stiff with age, but they never stopped working. She fixed, she built, she preserved. Her hair turned white. Her steps shortened. But her heart stayed steady. And yet, the whispers stayed too. When she turned 50, someone asked why she never had children. She's selfish, they said. She only lived for herself. No one noticed the ache in her eyes when she heard them. The turning point came the year the drought came for real. No water, no crops, no answers. The wells dried up one by one. The school closed. Livestock began to vanish. People left in quiet desperation. Those who stayed survived on rationed water, memories, and hope. But Sita, she began to dig. It started one early morning, before the sun had risen, before the birds began their song, before anyone thought to check what the strange thudding sound outside was. She was outside the mosque, sleeves rolled, feet planted, digging into the hard, cracked earth with a rusted shovel. People watched from their windows. They whispered, "She's finally lost it." But she didn't stop. Every day, for hours, she dug. then measured, then scribbled into a worn notebook, then dug again. Pipes appeared. Tools were delivered from the nearest city. Old blueprints were spread across the ground. It was madness. They thought until the water came. Not a flood, not a miracle, just a soft, slow stream of clean water flowing from a tap she had buried deep behind the mosque. People gathered. She said nothing, just turned the tap off, wiped her brow, and walked back to her small home. Later, it was discovered that she had built an underground rainwater harvesting system. For over a decade, she had studied. She had saved every coin from every carpentry job. She had sent letters to engineers, learned from handbooks, stored barrels, calculated slopes, waited for the moment. No one knew. No one helped. She had done it all herself, because she knew the drought would come again, and she wanted to be ready. Still, not everyone understood. She could have told us. She could have asked for help. She wanted the credit. But that wasn't true. She never spoke of it again. Her death was quiet. No children to sit by her bed. No husband to hold her hand. Just the old fan spinning slowly overhead and the notebook at her side. It was only afterward that the village found the truth. The receipts, the letters, the plans, the list of names of families she'd secretly helped. Now nourished generations. She had given everything: her youth, her health, her inheritance, her peace. And in return, they gave her a name. Selfish, but legacy has a strange way of turning echoes into monuments. They rebuilt the school with a well-fed, by her system. They named the community garden after her, and the children who once whispered stories about the lonely old woman now learn about her in textbooks. Writing essays titled "The Woman Who Gave Everything Without Saying a Word." You see, we often measure a life by how loudly it was lived. But Sita taught us that some lives are measured not in noise, but in impact, not in company, but in commitment, not in how many people remember you, but in how many you quietly helped. Breathe easier, drink deeper, and live longer. So, to those who feel forgotten, to those who have loved in silence, to those who have served without thanks, know this: your story matters. Your quiet goodness leaves ripples the world may not see, but they are there, and sometimes the greatest hero is the one who never asked to be one. If this story touched your heart, leave a comment below. Tell us about someone in your life who reminds you of Sita, or share how you've seen the power of quiet service in your own life. If you're new here, we invite you to subscribe, not for flashy content, but for stories that make us feel, make us think, and remind us what really matters. And if you've ever been misunderstood, know this: You are not alone. Your story may not be sung in the streets, but in the hearts you've helped, even in silence. It will never be forgotten.